Hey, this is another video I wasn't planning on making, but I probably should. So let's get to it. Two people in California are suing Ubisoft over shutting down The Crew. They have a few charges, but the main one seems to be that Ubisoft deceived customers into thinking they own copies of their video games when they paid for them. So false advertising, essentially. Now, the first thing I want to say is I was completely unaware of this. This was not one of the strategies of Stop Killing Games. If you rewind back to the campaign announcement video, our only plans for the United States were to contact the FTC. And even then, I said it was very unlikely they would do anything. And hey, I was right. The FTC didn't do anything. But the thing about that was contacting the FTC was free? This lawsuit is very far from free. I have to assume this cost tens of thousands of dollars minimum, maybe six figures, I don't know. So assuming I even had that kind of money, which I do not, I would have to really think there's a strong chance of winning to pursue that line of attack. But hey, none of that matters now, because two guys from California went and did it anyway. This lawsuit is on. Now, while I'm 100% on the side of the plaintiffs in spirit, I do not agree with this strategy, since I think it's a lost cause. Sort of. There's nuance to it I'll get to in a second. I do think they have a chance, actually. But the problem is, I think that even if they win, it won't be in a way that matters for gaming as a whole. See, it's kind of a probability hierarchy in my mind. I think the most likely scenario is this fails because customers agreed to a EULA when they installed the game, which says Ubisoft can do anything, pretty much. But let's say they make a compelling case for false advertising and they win this. Well, then I think the only remedy that would come from this would be to more clearly advertise that the company is going to take your game away at any time. And I don't really care about clearer labeling. I care about games being destroyed. I never undertook this campaign for better labeling. While that's a good practice, if that's all you're fighting for, then that's still surrender in my eyes. So the only outcome that would actually make me want to pursue this would be if California rules that the practice of disabling a game that was sold as a one-time purchase with no expiration date was unlawful. And I think there is no chance of that happening. The outcome is almost certainly going to be one of these two. And these will not save more games from being destroyed. So I abandoned this idea back before the campaign really got started. I talk more about it in this video if you're curious. But I have gotten emails before from people saying, "I'm tired of your pessimism about the USA, Ross. You're always talking about Europe and Australia on this issue. But we can fix this in America. You just need a better attitude." Well, I'm tired of the pessimism on this issue also. But what's that saying? Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away? See, all my research has led me to conclude that nothing short of an act of Congress can stop game destruction in the United States. Which is why I've been putting all my efforts on this into other countries. But if you think I'm being too defeatist, good news! This lawsuit is going to put theory to the test. I've looked over the lawsuit papers, and while I think it could use a little work, I also think it's the best shot you could hope for to challenge this practice going through the US judicial system. I mean, don't get too excited. I still think the outcome is going to be one of these two, which will not save games. But this case will put the issue of game destruction to bed in the United States one way or another. So with that said, let's look at some of what's in the document. Yeah, it's going to be one of those videos. Well, there's a lot in here, but a few things stood out to me. First, I'm in it. See? There I am. Yeah, that surprised me. So maybe the campaign helped motivate them to do this? Or maybe we're just part of the narrative pile. Number 35 there. The next thing I noticed is it looks like the buyers were truly deceived. You know, I've been speaking out against games being destroyed for a while now, and I've seen endless comments over the years of people thinking I didn't realize the company was going to destroy the game. No, I knew. I have a clue as to how these games are designed. I just think destroying them is an unacceptable practice. Full stop. Well, these guys didn't know. They bought physical copies of The Crew at GameStop, and they thought that meant they got to keep their game. And here's where trolls on the internet might want to mock them for thinking that. Though I would ask, what exactly are you celebrating by knowing they were incorrect in thinking they owned what they paid money for? Not having rights? Yeah, that's a great thing to gloat over. Anyway, clear labeling would help reduce deception in cases like this, but I bet even the plaintiffs would prefer companies just not destroy their games in the first place. Also, I have to imagine the plaintiffs are feeling my pain every time they see a comment online like, "This is why I only buy physical," knowing that doesn't mean anything now. I guess they learned that the hard way. Speaking of learning, I also got the impression the law firm writing this had a limited understanding of video games, which is understandable, but a couple parts stood out to me. Here on 18, when players use the internet in games, they are using the internet hosted by the game company's servers. Unlike in the past, where users could continue playing old games if they continue using their old consoles, players now have to rely on the company to continue hosting the game in order to continue having access. If the company's servers for a particular game go down or are shut down, the games become unplayable unless there is an offline version. Okay, sometimes that is true. Other times it's not. For consoles, that's more true, though I think even there are exceptions. Hell, the first episode of Dead Game News, I was talking about how players are running PlayStation 2 games online using network emulation. But for modern games, take something like Baldur's Gate 3. That came out last year. Larian servers could get hit by a meteor, and you would still be able to play that game online with other people. I wish people would understand that online multiplayer does not mean a game has to die or require a company server. That's an active choice by the company, not some intrinsic property of games. I've said before how this campaign has been an uphill battle in every way. This is part of what I mean. Even people who are on your side don't always understand what's possible with games and accept popular framing even if it's wrong. Oh, and here's another one. Dedicated gaming servers are helpful for real-time strategy games like The Crew. Real-time strategy games require players to make quick decisions and micromanage units. Okay, well, I wouldn't try to pitch The Crew as a strategy game myself, but this detail doesn't really matter for court anyway. Another thing I noticed that doesn't matter, at least I'm guessing, is how casual, if not inflammatory, some of the language was in this lawsuit document. Hell, the entire prologue of The Crew couldn't be done in multiplayer. While the announcement was an attempt to appease the angry plebeians. However, in fact, consumers were just lowly serfs. Now, as someone who talks casually myself, if I was filing a lawsuit, I think I would keep my language far more formal and less dramatic than this. But I've never filed a lawsuit, and they have, so they're calling the shots. Just a bit more. One thing I did find amusing in the lawsuit papers is this part. Defendants have engaged in fraudulent business practices by knowingly representing to consumers that the products they purchased were video games, when in fact this was false, since defendants destroyed the game's servers, rendering the product no longer a video game. If this lawsuit wins, it won't solve the problem, but that would be delicious if the remedy was that companies had to label that their video games are not video games right on the cover. That would be the labeling we deserve. Oh, speaking of which, some of you may think that California bill from the last video means that future games will already be compliant. Not necessarily. If you look at the language in this lawsuit, it could be that bill is not enough to satisfy the court if Ubisoft is found guilty. But I'm really speculating on this part. Now, I have reason to think that this lawsuit may lose, and a reason to think that it could win in a limited fashion. The reason I think it could lose goes back to that court case, Pro CD versus Zeidenberg. Look at this part here. Defendants omitted material facts from the packaging and marketing of the product by omitting they would shut down the product's servers at any point without providing, at a minimum, an offline mode for consumers to continue to access the game they paid for. Well, not listing everything on the packaging and sticking it in the EULA is exactly what Pro CD versus Heidenberg is about. So this is practically settled law in the US. I think this part is doomed. That said, the false advertising angle may still have teeth, especially if somebody involved in the lawsuit is watching this video. If I was in their shoes, I would be pushing this copy of The Crew. Yeah, the PS4 Wild Run edition. Maybe other versions have this too, but you see that part there? Yeah, it's kind of blurry, but what's that say? Expires January 1st, 2099? I read through the lawsuit and I didn't see this mentioned anywhere. If your law firm isn't including this in your case, what are they even doing? This is a jury trial. If I was the plaintiff, I would want to pass that around to every member of the jury so they can hold it in their hands and read that. This is as close to a silver bullet as you're going to get for this case. I think this is very damning against Ubisoft. Now, the reason I haven't pushed this much in the venues I've been operating in is because I think this would be a Pyrrhic victory. While I do think this is clearly false advertising, the obvious remedy is don't do that. Oh look, if they don't print that, now there's no violation. So this won't save other games. See, my goal with this campaign is not to hurt Ubisoft. They're just a target of convenience. If I just wanted to inflict financial harm on Ubisoft, I would be pushing their false expiration date up and down. And believe me, I could have done more damage with this in the consumer agencies internationally if I wanted to. But I'm not really a vindictive person. I'm a solve the problem kind of person. This doesn't solve the problem of games being destroyed, so it's only had minor use to me. But the plaintiffs here may be the vindictive types. So sure, here you go. This might be really useful for your case. If you're listening, you should make your law firm aware of these copies as soon as possible. Though even with this label, I think there's a chance they could still lose. Because the judge may say nothing companies put on the cover matters. All that matters is what's in the EULA, and Ubisoft covered their backs there. That's how stacked the deck is in the USA on this issue, where a label like this may not be considered false advertising. I cannot say for sure. Anyway, just because I don't agree with this lawsuit tactically, that doesn't mean I'm against it. I just think it won't solve the problem. But they've already filed it and hired a law firm, so they may as well push it as hard as they can. It's not gonna hurt anything. And hey, the rest of us are getting an expensive judicial test to find out if the situation on game destruction is hopeless in the US or not. And since I was listed in the court papers, the plaintiffs or their law firm are free to contact me if anything I know is helpful somehow. I still think our only hope on this lies in foreign consumer agencies. Or hey, the European Citizens Initiative for EU citizens. And we will be having more happening in the UK in the near future, though that one's more of a long shot. I will say this lawsuit does make me feel less like Don Quixote, since someone's fighting this issue with even worse odds than what I'm doing. Though I guess they get paid if they win, so maybe they're the smart ones here. Alright, that's it. See ya!